Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a fantastic day, even out wherever you are. This week, I'm back with a brand new episode of the podcast. We're going to be talking to Maddy about her journey through debt, her journey through how she helps people, and also how she has grown a TikTok that's now rather large and becoming quite interesting and quite profitable for her. So I thought that would be interesting this week. So thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me. Once again, I'm now going to hand over past me to take on this interview. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again. If you would like to hear how video can help your business and you took value from this episode, find more information somewhere around the bottom of the description down below, and I'll see you in just a moment's time.
So, hi guys, I'm Maddy Alexander Grout. I'm founder of Mad About Money app. I am a TikTok influencer. I'm a TikTok coach. I'm a speaker. I'm a radio presenter. I'm a public figure in the media, and an all-round crazy ADHD person.
All round lovely lady is what I'm going to say. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm going to start with something that you didn't allude to, but I think is, I'm going to say, eye-catching or important, especially now and very topical. And that's why I want to start there. There's a lot of conversation around debt. There's a lot of conversation around money. The economy is in a very interesting place right now, and that's the terminology I'm deliberately using because we don't like talking about recessions, we don't like talking about depressions, and we don't like talking about things being negative, right? Because I think it's a mindset thing, which I'm sure you'll allude to. But how's your money story? Because you said you do some money work. You said, you've obviously got the groups and the pages, and some of your TikTok and a large percentage of your TikTok is about money advice, right? So how did you get here, right? Well, I guess some would say, how are you qualified to talk about money?
Yeah, so advice is a word that I am not allowed to use because I'm not financially allowed to by the FCA. It's financial education, and everything that I talk about comes from a place of qualified by experience. So everything I talk about, I have been there, done that, bought the t-shirts. In fact, I've bought all of the t-shirts because I've got ADHD. It's a massive pile of them back there. And lots of the things that I've gone through have been a learning experience, but I have learned every single thing that I can possibly learn so that I can equip myself to help people as best that I can in our app. So my money journey started when I was 18, probably a bit before that, actually, when I first started earning my own money. It never stayed in my pocket, and I never really knew why. I had a lot of money trauma from when I was younger, and this was down to my parents. I mean, to say it's down to my parents, it's not very nice on them. It's not their fault that they didn't love each other and they got a divorce. But actually, it was quite scarring for me. I spent money when I was feeling emotional and I was going through a really tough time with the separation of my parents, and also my first boyfriend breaking up with me. That made me incredibly sad, and I spent money to make myself happy. So that pattern started around the age of like 17, 18. And when I went to university, I suddenly found myself in a position where I had more money than I ever had before. I had a grant. I didn't really think about what I was supposed to be spending it on. And to make matters worse, I walked into Freshers' Fair on day one of uni, and I was met by banks and loan companies and credit card companies, and they basically throw money at you. So I signed up for everything. I was like, I'll have that credit card because it comes with a free Domino's pizza voucher, or I'll have that thing because it comes with a New Look voucher. So I signed up for all of these credit lines, and I ended up with 60 grand's worth of credit facility available to me. At first, at university, I spent on what I was supposed to spend on, my rent and the bills and the internet, things like that. But it started to spiral. I was going out and drinking a lot because, as a student, you do those kind of things, try and socialize. And I found myself in quite a depressive, negative pattern. So I'd go out one night, I'd go and drink, I'd wake up, I'd feel hungover, I'd feel rubbish about myself. So I'd go and buy some clothes. And then I'd go out because I wanted to show off the clothes. So that cycle kind of went on for a good like 3.5 years. I started to not be able to afford my bills. So I started putting money on the credit cards, and then it just felt like free money. So I went crazy and I was buying all sorts. I was buying takeaways because I was actually, hungover a lot of the time, couldn't really be bothered to cook. I was buying lots of booze. I was going out buying clothes, bags, shoes, quite expensive items at times, like designer things that made me feel happy, but then I'd feel guilty about them afterwards. And actually, feeling guilty about something and not having the courage to take it back, but also no inclination to take it back. I just thought I was lazy, but it turns out that's kind of an ADHD brain thing. You just task initiation is quite difficult. So I couldn't bring myself to go into town to do anything that was like a mundane task. It had to be for something that gave me joy. So it was always the shopping.
And I mean, I think that's a common reality for a lot of people, right? And I think so many people, especially now, there's multiple studies that have said, when things get harder, what the uptick in makeup, short skirts, coffees, chocolate, etc., etc.,
Yeah.
etc., right? Holidays, so on, right? All these kind of like, I don't want to say short, but endorphin boosting, and I'm sure we'll get onto TikTok later, which is an endorphin machine, are in this position where they're creating these short endorphin hits. But the problem that potentially one would run into is, number one, you gain this kind of, I guess, this immunity to it eventually, these short-term things. So you keep having to do something larger and larger and larger, right? It reminds me of, the kind of expose or the kind of like, oh my god content on YouTube sometimes,
Yes.
right? Is all I call it, because it's like you have to keep upping what you're doing, right? It can't just be, oh, I need to do a £10,000 giveaway. It now needs to be £100,000 or $1 million, right? It has to constantly be up and up and up. And there's lots of psychology and lots of click and lots of kind of attention around that. But so you were in this position, you were in this unfortunate position where you were building up this kind of significant number of debt, right? How did you go from that to debt free?
It was a journey, I can tell you that. So I had been at university for 4 years. I was in Leicester, lovely place. I mean, it wasn't really a lovely place actually. It was kind of a bit of a dive, but I liked it. It was nice. And I was getting to the point where every time I walked through the door, I was tripping over my doormat because there were so many envelopes underneath it that I was ignoring, and just I got really overwhelmed, and I didn't really know what I was meant to be doing. And my housemates had fallen out with all of those guys because I wasn't paying my share, but they were still seeing that I was spending money on other things. So it I wasn't a very liked person in my house at that point. But I didn't really know what to do. And actually that situation made me really upset. So then I spent more, and I started to realize that I had some form of spending addiction. And I didn't really know that spending addiction was a thing. People talk about shopaholics, and essentially that's what a shopaholic is. It's a spending addiction, but mine wasn't just on clothes, it was on everything. I was spending money on stuff just for the sake of spending money. And it got to the point where it was so bad that I had debt collectors letters coming through the door. And one day I just thought, I'll move away, because that will get rid of everything. They won't find me. you Not really thinking about the fact that, you kind of leave a credit trail wherever you go, and, people do find you. There's this whole thing called a credit report, which, you do show up on, and people do know where you move to. So we moved in with my ex-boyfriend's parents, and as soon as the debt collectors letters started coming there, they chucked us out because they didn't want any of my debts associated with their house, which, fair enough. That relationship was quite toxic, and I ended up not being particularly happy in that relationship, and I left him. I went and sofa surfed for a while until I could afford to to rent somewhere. Rented somewhere, and again, the debt collectors letters followed me, and then the bailiffs started turning up. And I had one of those little chains that you put across the door, and I mean, thank God for that, because this guy tried to come in, he put his foot through my door. And that was one of the most scary situations. I was just like, I don't really know what he's going to take, because I don't have anything for him to take. They tried to take my car. It was a very stressful time. I ended up phoning up my mum and saying, I've done something really bad. And she said, come home, nothing's too bad. We can't fix, we'll fix it all. And I thought, she's going to help me pay this off. It'll be fine. And I got home, and she didn't. She booked me an appointment with Citizens Advice Bureau, and she said, you need to go and get some professional help. So I went to Citizens Advice Bureau, and they said to me, you need to go bankrupt. And I said, what? They said, yeah, you have to go bankrupt because there's no way you're going to pay off that money. You're in £40,000 worth of debt and you're not earning very much, so you're not going to pay it off. You've got to go bankrupt. I was like, fuck you guys. I don't want to do that. Like, that is absolutely not what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you hard. So I went away and I had to think about it. They gave me this debt plan, which was like the 50/30/20 rule. If you've ever heard of it, it's where you spend 50% of your income on fixed your fixed monthly expenses, so your rent or your mortgage and your bills. Then you spend 30% on things that you kind of want. So like your food, your clothes, anything that you need, like living expenses. And then 20% on your debts. And I worked out it was going to take me something like 60 years to actually pay that off. So I took matters into my own hands and I came up with my own version of that rule, which was the 50/40/10 rule, where I lived on 10% of my income every single month and I used 40% to pay off my debts. And it was hard. I was working in recruitment at the time, earning fairly big bonuses. Some months I'd get like 3 or 4 grand in a bonus, and I'd clear the whole lot. I would put it all on my debts, and I focused really hard. What I later learned was that I hyper focused on it. I didn't know I had ADHD at the time, and it was very much a hyper focus thing. I changed all my spending habits. I became really thrifty. I started going to the supermarket 6, maybe 7 times a week, following the guy around with a little yellow sticker gun, and just going and getting as many bargains as I could. I started selling stuff on Facebook, but I'd also go to charity shops. I'd go and find designer things and I would resell them. And I started to make extra cash that way. I learned as much as I could about spending and saving, and I started to recognize what my spending patterns were and what my spending triggers were. Alcohol was a massive one. People don't really talk about how alcohol affects you, but it kills your brain cells and actually it makes you feel low. And when you're in a state of hangover or a state of drunk, spending can happen. So I knew that I had a problem there, um, possibly an alcohol problem as well. That's another story. But it was very much down to me, and I knew that I was the person who had to change everything. So I just worked really hard. Um, I was working really, really well in my job and things were going okay, until I had a bit of an experience with my old boss where essentially, to cut a long story short, he called me fat, but on a group email to all of the people in the office that I worked with. Would have been a sackable offence for him, should have taken him to HR, didn't. But I decided to leave that job. So I ended up being jobless for a while, which kind of put a halt on like the rest of the spending that I was doing. So I knew that I couldn't spend. I knew that I had to get a new job really fast. I did find one quite quickly. I just took the first thing that came along. It wasn't right for me. And then something pretty bad happened, but it actually turned out to be a bit of a silver lining. I was about £15,000 away from being debt free. I'd worked really hard to pay off the rest of the 25, and my house burnt down. Now, I hear what you're saying. I'm hearing all I can hear is insurance fraud, insurance fraud. But it wasn't actually my house that burned down. It was the house above me. Some students had a barbecue on the roof terrace, and they'd just gone to bed and left it there. So the whole of the roof went up, and my flat, every single thing that I owned got damaged by water and went mouldy because we couldn't get into the flats for a good 3 weeks. So by the time I went in, everything was covered in mold. Everything was, black mold, dirty, smelly, damp, horrible. Luckily, I did have contents insurance and I managed to claim it. But because I had so many expensive items of clothing from when I'd been going through my university, I'm going to go and buy designer clothes phase, I managed to get £16,000 worth of insurance money from the insurance company, which was not only enough to clear my debts, it was also enough to rebuild my life. So I rebuilt my life on £1,000. I sofa surfed again for a few months while I was building up a deposit to get together for my rent. I bought charity shop furniture. I bought charity shop clothes. Like I literally lived in charity shop stuff. And that was just my way of life. It was my way of life for a good 10 years. So,
Do you think? Sorry to cut you up. I'm just thinking like there's a lot of takeaways there that I don't want to leave. Do you think that that process and that story allowed you to become the person you are today? And then if so, would you change it? Because I think sometimes when we have these negative experiences, when we have these large debt things, when, unfortunately someone maybe gets abused or they get
mm,
bullied or, look, there's a big yardstick between obviously the two here,
there
but
is.
there's any form of traumatic
Do you
event,
know what?
right? We're talking
Yeah,
anything.
I've been through a lot of trauma in my life. I probably would have taken away the house fire because I literally lost everything that I owned, including all my memories, my photos, letters that my grandparents had written me, things that were really meaningful. But what it did do was it taught me a valuable life lesson that stuff means crap, right? I came out with my life, I came out with the memories that were in my head, and I came out alive. So, this all happened while I was asleep in my bed. So, it could have been worse. I don't regret any of my life decisions. I feel like they've all of those things have brought me to the place where I am now. They've given me resilience, they've given me the mindset that I have. Um, and now when I go through terrible times, because I do still go through rubbish stuff, it gives me the strength to carry on. And I look back at my life and I think, do you know what? I've overcome some really big fucking hurdles. And that's made me who I am today. So would I change any of it? Probably not, because I wouldn't be where I am today without all of those things happening. At the time, they felt really rubbish, but it is what it is.
It's really interesting because it reminds me of a conversation I had a couple of years ago now with a very old friend of mine. Still know her, known her for 10 years. We were talking about mental health. We were talking about negative articulations, etc., etc., etc. And she asked me, would you change the fact you are dyslexic? Would you change the fact you've tried to commit suicide? Would you change the fact you cut yourself? Would you change the fact you've had you're bullied for half your life, etc., etc. All these things, and I said no, because it gives me the context and gives me the understanding of, okay, this is where I am, this is what I've overcome, this is where I've come from. But as you say, it also gives you that hardness, it gives you that kind of perspective, and that's why I lean into perspective a lot, because I think sometimes when people just consume my content, they can see me as someone who maybe is a bit hardened and a bit kind of brutal when it can be, but that comes from my understanding of the world, that comes from the context in which I have, right? And I think in the nice way possible, I think it can be kind of a birth and fire kind of
Yeah,
situation where if you survive it, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, right? For the record, I wouldn't. But if you can survive it, it will actually be the reason why you're so determined, why you're so hungry, why you're so successful. Because, I'm sure everyone listening and myself have had that moment that you had in the Citizens Bureau, which is like, oh, you need to go bankrupt, right? Well, actually, no, fuck you. I'm going to do it this way because I'm going to prove you
yeah.
wrong kind of mindset. And I think, how is that, if that has that mindset sort of allowed you to continue to carry on with what you're doing? And, I'm sure we'll get into the TikTok journey as well in a minute, but I think a lot of it, I guess it comes with this, and I've always had this mindset and this work ethic that's like, whatever problem arises, and we've seen it with, because I'm based in Salisbury, we've seen it with Novichok, we've seen it with Brexit, we've seen it with COVID, we've seen it with, now the economic challenge, the economic, whatever you want to call it, cost of living challenge, etc., etc. All of these challenges that, as a source of business owner, I've had to brunt, right? But it's given me this kind of yardstick and understanding of going, okay, yes, that's difficult, but actually, if I just outwork the problem, it will become better eventually.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
it all builds resilience, and it builds a story. And people in business, they buy from people. They don't buy products. They buy from people. So it's about how you make those people feel. And I feel like my story, people sort of resonate with my story, especially now because we are in a cost of living crisis. And every single step in my journey has come to me building the product that I've got today. So, the next part of my journey, I had my son and I had the worst mental health condition that you can possibly have as a new parent. I had postpartum psychosis. Trigger warning here for anybody who's suffered with baby loss or anything along those lines. But I didn't want to be around. I didn't want my son to be around, and we were both very close to not being around. So it was a tough time. I met an amazing group of mums who made me feel accepted and loved and like I was meant to be here, which was really important at the time, which led me down the road of wanting to support other parents. All of these little things that have happened in my journey have led to the app that I run now. I set up a business helping people to get local discounts in local shops. I've always been a really big believer in businesses supporting businesses, and what better way than to help to drive them customers. So I started up a discount card that helped people to shop local. Started off in Southampton, then it went to Portsmouth and Basingstoke and Andover. We kind of missed Salisbury actually. Sorry about that. Weird place, Salisbury. Very lovely. I love Salisbury. In fact, I grew up in Salisbury, so I know it well. But we grew and grew and grew, and I started off with this local Hampshire business. Then we went to Wiltshire, and it grew to be a nationwide business. And you know, all of that happened because I was made redundant, and I accidentally found entrepreneurship. Now, if I hadn't been made redundant, I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have pushed myself out of my comfort zone. If I hadn't have had all of those knocks previously, I probably wouldn't have had the courage or the confidence to actually go and start my own business. But I believed in something. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make this work. And, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, do they? I mean, COVID was exactly that. Um, it came from nowhere and it stopped me dead in my tracks. We had a product that was not relevant after COVID in any way, shape, or form because people couldn't leave the house. It was stop, start, on, off for us for like 2 years. We ended up taking on a lot of business debt, which, I definitely regret that. That is my one regret, taking on business debt. I wish that we had just done other things to fund the business. We did get investors, but I didn't do proper due diligence on them, and they turned out to not be people who were as much in my corner as I thought they were, which was a horrible experience. Um, when I ended up closing that business last year, I ended up in £35,000 worth of debt again because of the fact that we'd taken on business debt. I hadn't read the small print because, ADHD, paperwork, ugh. And that got me in a hole again. Luckily, I had the mindset and the determination to clear it quickly, and it's almost gone. Um, but anybody being in £35,000 worth of debt, whether it's personal or business, is terrifying. You don't know how you're going to get out of that, and some days you feel like you're not going to get out of that, and it's hard. Um, but I had the tools and the tricks and the things that I've been going out and telling people, and that was really bad for my mindset as well, because I was thinking, who is gonna want to work with a money specialist who's in debt, you know? But the way that I got into debt there was growing a business, and actually it had nothing to do with my personal finances, and I specialize in personal finances. That's my bag really. So my TikTok was formed out of the back of my old business failing. I needed to do something positive to clear my mental health. So I started reaching out to brands to see whether or not they'd be interested in doing a collaboration with my audience. At the time, I had 10,000 TikTok, 10,000 Instagram followers, and I had about 10,000 LinkedIn. So I was thinking, I'm not an influencer by any stretch of the imagination, but I've got an audience that, so I can sell to people, and I'm good at selling. So I had this amazing product reach out to me called Wipe. In fact, I messaged them because I saw them on Dragon's Den, and this was the way that I found clients for a while. I used to watch Dragon's Den, and then I used to approach them because I'd be like, "Great, they've just got investment, they've got some money to pay me." So I used to do that, and this company Wipe, they did this, like, it's like a pump thing which has got gel on it, and you put it onto toilet roll, and it essentially turns your toilet roll into a baby wipe. Very kind on the bottom, and definitely a product that I would recommend. Um, but it got me started. So they said, "We'd like you to promote us on TikTok." And I said, "I don't really have a TikTok account. I've got the one that I set up in the pandemic, which is all about me dancing and lip syncing and using weird filters and that sort of thing." And they said, "No, we want a TikTok video." So I said, "Okay, cool." So I did them a TikTok video. and it got 80 views. And I thought, okay, that's not too bad for, for a first attempt. 80 isn't that bad. So I started doing more content, and I had in the back of my mind some marketing training that I once had, which was about entertaining, educating, and informing people. And that is something that my first TikTok account definitely wasn't. It was all about doing silly dances and like not really providing any form of, I mean, maybe entertainment at a push, but it wasn't very entertaining. It was more amusing and embarrassing than anything else. So I just kind of started talking about my money tips, all the things that I'd learned, talking about money mindset, talking about the spending addiction, how I paid off my debts, and it started to grow. And in about a month and a half's time, I had 1,000 followers, and I was like, "This is insane! It's growing crazily. None of my other platforms have grown this fast." So I invested a lot of time into learning how the platform worked and how the algorithms worked, how to get better attraction. And it wasn't all about the filters and the using trending sounds, like all of the TikTok influencers who go out there and they were like, yeah, to grow on TikTok you just need to follow the trends. And I decided that actually that wasn't the way I was going to grow. So I grew on TikTok by talking to the camera and just being honest about my struggles, my journey, and my life. And over the space of a year, I got to 40,000 followers really fast. And I had some big names paying me to do TikTok content for them. I've had big brands pay me like over 2 grand for a 60-second video. I do smaller packages for small businesses because, again, they're still very close to my heart. But when that business died at the end of last year, my TikTok was all I had. So I just put everything that I possibly could into that. And I thought about all of the things that I was good at, all of the things that I'd tried to do before. So I tried to do the discount card. People loved it. They loved saving money. I tried to do a parenting app. People loved the support that I was giving to parents. I had the idea of setting up a neurodivergent app, but then I thought about it and I thought, oh, maybe the audience is a bit small because, yes, there are lots of people who have got ADHD, lots of people who have got autism. However, I don't think that there is a big enough market for me to just do that. So I started writing down all of these things and I was like, it's got to be something I can do here that benefits people because actually I get the majority of my dopamine when I'm educating people. Like my background in corporate was a trainer. I used to do e-learning and I used to get a massive buzz from like delivering presentations and public speaking and all that kind of stuff. When I was at university, I did radio. I was station manager of my radio station. I used to do drive time on local radio. So I started to think of myself as an influencer, and people were saying, "Maddy, you're an influencer," and I was like, "Ugh, that's a horrible word, yuck," and I hated it. I genuinely hated being an influencer. But then I thought about it, and I thought, actually, I am, and maybe I should start owning it. I know how to grow a TikTok from scratch to 40,000 followers in a year. I should start teaching people about this. So, although my specialist subject is money, I now teach people how to use TikTok. I do like group coaching sessions, I can do one-on-ones, um, because I'm passionate about it and I like it. But I'm
What would you say? Sorry, because there's a lot of people in the audience I know are still now, ironically, still thinking that TikTok is exactly what you started as,
Yeah,
right? Which
and
was
it's a common
basically
misconception.
musically, right? It was basically musically, right? Let's be honest. It's what still lived on TikTok when it was bought up by Musically, and that was the essence of what it still was. But for I would probably say 2019 it began, but really lent in as the pandemic really took hold and everyone basically had, let's be honest, nothing else to do. Right, you and me included, right? We were in a position where it was like, right, okay, there is actually legitimate reasons to be on TikTok, right, as a business owner,
Absolutely.
right?
So
For
now, I
the
mean, now, um, if you have competitors, if they're on TikTok, you need to be on TikTok. If they're not on TikTok, it's a massive opportunity for you to be selling on there. And there are talks for everything. The way that the algorithm is set up and the way that it works is it's curated to your interests. It's curated to the people who follow you and their interests. So you can actually build a really good community on the platform, and a good community of people who have the same mindset as you, the same worries, the same struggles. And that's how you grow. It's so much easier to grow on TikTok than it is to grow anywhere else. And I've had public speaking opportunities. I've had press. I'm featured in the national press most weeks now. So I am not just an influencer. I guess I'm kind of a public figure. Not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I've worked really hard to get there.
I think that's an important point, though, that some people misunderstand as a business owner, right? With the age of the internet, with the age of TikTok, with the age of social media, the age of everyone owning their own podcast, everyone having their own media company within reason, right? We all have access to Zoom. Maybe we don't all have a professional camera, but we all have a phone or a way to capture our voice and articulate it to a wider audience. I think it's a very important point, and it's around now is the question of mindset around, are you willing to be one, number one, and then number two, what do you want to stand for, and are you okay with having that, I guess, public perception of your opinions on things, regardless of where they sit.
I mean
right?
that is,
and I think
that's a hard thing, and I, to a certain extent, like I used to kind of mask my opinions on stuff, but now I'm just like, do you know what? They are part of me. They form my personality. If people don't like it, they can fuck right off. And I know that sounds really horrible, but I think people buy from people that they like. And if people don't like me, then they're not going to buy from me. So I'd rather show up authentically and be myself. And if people don't like that, then that's their issue, not mine. Because I've got lots of people who do follow me and who do like me a lot. Just lucky.
I think for me, I talk about this quite a lot, but it's about creating that tribe around you that will, I guess, subscribe to what you're articulating, but also respectfully, if you don't agree with certain parts or don't agree with any of it, then that's cool, all good. But I think it's also about understanding, because sometimes when we don't have that public perception, we don't have that content, we don't have that library, people are kind of in the unknown stage. They don't know.
Yes,
and it's actually arguably a waste of time, right, for etc. to not have that out there, because someone might then try to build a relationship with you and then find actually, oh, I don't like this person, and that's then a potential waste of time when we can condense that time just by creating the content and just saying, well, this is my views.
We're all on
right?
social media, right? As a business owner, if you're not on social media and you're not putting yourself out there, you're not going to be getting the business. And video content is higher ranked on pretty much every single platform now. I think Instagram, higher ranked platforms. Like my Facebook, doing reels on Facebook, I get thousands and thousands of views and likes on them. Whereas like you do a post, it could go to dust. LinkedIn's about the only one that video content doesn't really do better on, but video content is here to stay. TikTok is a place where not only you're going to beat your competition by being there, but it's still fairly early in its infancy. Although it's got like 1.7 billion users, it's still fairly early on. So you have still got a chance to kind of get in there and actually become a good content creator on TikTok. It's not for everyone, but there are certain types of videos that you can do on TikTok where you don't have to show your face. You just do voiceovers, or you do things with your hands, or film things that are going on in your everyday life, like packing up your product, doing things for your business. TikTok Shop for any product businesses is a game changer. And lives, people can buy things from you as you're like packing up your products. It's such a good place to be able to sell and kind of generate revenue from.
What would you say to people? Because I mean, I guess this is more of a video / social media related question, not necessarily, but maybe lean it on TikTok if you want to. What would you say to people who are hesitant on the principle of I need to be on content, I need to create content, right? Because one of the main things that I coach on is the confidence element around I'm actually going to be in content. I'm going to talk to a audience, even though that audience doesn't exist yet.
Well, once you know who you're trying to target, talk to that one person. Make sure that you've got the person, your client avatar. Once you've got that one person, all of your content should be related to that one person. And if you know you're talking to one person, it's not that scary, right? So that's kind of where I come from. But it's funny you say about like the constant content creation. So my new business is called Mad About Money. It's a social media app. One of the reasons why I decided to go down this route was because I was sick of being constantly sold to. As somebody who has a spending addiction, I don't want to see ads in my feed all the time. And I was having conversations about my kids doing horse riding lessons or like jujitsu, or I was talking about a band, and constantly, like every single thing that I was talking about, I was being sold to on. And it knew me so well. And I was thinking, this is horrible, for someone who's got a spending addiction to plant things on their feed that you know that they're going to buy. I mean, yeah, clever Facebook, but it's so damaging to people's mental health. So I had this idea that I could come up with a platform that was a social media platform, but without social influence. So there are no influencers on my platform. There are no followers, there's no likes, there's no connections. It's all about those three things: educating, entertaining, and informing. But also about support and about community and about people going above and beyond to help and support people during the cost of living crisis. It's not just about money. Money is the overarming arch of what the app is all about. We've got a voucher store, we've got an insurance comparison site. It's all about money saving tips and how to be better off, how to budget, how to get out of debt. But it's also about mental health. It's about family life, work life, entrepreneurship, all of the things that actually really do contribute to how you live your life and how you show up in the world, especially from a money perspective. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure of was that people didn't get sold things that weren't relevant to them. And actually, people don't get sold things at all unless they actually go looking for the things they want to buy. So, right, you've got Amazon. Okay. So, if you go to Amazon, you know you want to buy something. So, you look for the thing that you want to buy. Within the Mad About Money app, people can go and they can look for products and services. They can look for business products, business services. They can look for consumer products and consumer services, but they don't get it rammed down their throat all the time. So it's a lot more it's a nicer place to be without that constant pressure. And if you create one piece of content a month and you come back once a month and you just have a little browse, there's nothing addictive that's going to keep you there. There's nothing that is going to stop your content from being seen by anybody because there's no algorithms that dictate all of it.
Okay, it's an interesting approach on that, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it jumps to mind a question that you mentioned regarding the cost of living crisis, the cost of living challenge, etc. And the reason why I rephrase it that way is because I think for me, it's around your mindset around it. Because yes, of course, you, everyone is going to be feeling it, but arguably, are we all feeling it equally? Don't know.
Absolutely not. I mean, like, I can guarantee you 100%, I'm not going to get into a political rant here, but, Rishi doesn't even know what the definition of things like tax cuts are. We've heard this recently in the news. He is not out there for the people. This government is not out there for the people, and they are certainly not living the cost of living situation in the same way that we are. There are people who are struggling to eat. There are people who are struggling to pay their bills. There are people every single day who are getting into debt, not because they're bad with managing money, but they don't have enough to manage. And that's the problem. So, what we do is help people in a slightly more fun way to be able to manage their money, their mindset, all of the stuff that goes around that in a non patronizing, supportive community space where people don't get judged, they just get support.
No, of course, and that's the important point I was going to mention. Of course, this excludes the concept of billionaires and blah blah blah. Right? Lovely, I'm sure, but the principle which I think is important to discuss and or articulate is the mindset when it comes to the principle of either bringing your expenditure down that's non-accessory, which I'm sure you can comment on, but also the ability to create revenue either that doesn't exist or more revenue from other options that aren't just a traditional job necessarily, right? I'm very fortunate. I'm very grateful to be in the position I'm in because I have a skill set that I have developed in a time of ease, which is very odd to say when you consider what that time was. but to create and have this ease where it was quite easy to make money because of how much money was floating around, where I know the levers, so to speak, to in theory manipulate to create revenue out of
Yes,
thin
yeah.
air, right? But for those who maybe are new in business, about to go into business, about to say, you know what, this job is XYZ, insert, bad thing, bad boss, bad person, bad culture, etc. There's lots of reasons, right? Or just, this isn't for me anymore. What would you say to people who either are about to make that leap or have just made that leap, or potentially considering it? Is there a kind of golden plan? Is there like,
Um,
because I think for me it comes down to risk profile as
it
well, but
does, yeah. I think so.
it's never a perfect time in my.
There isn't. I when I started my first business, it was because I'd had enough of the corporate world. I started a business that I thought I knew what I was doing. So my first ever business that I ran was a recruitment agency. I was really good at recruitment. I've been in it for nearly 12 years. I had big clients. I knew what I was doing. But I I just thought I'm going to be good at this because I'm really good at recruitment. I didn't really think about the fact that actually all of the big, massive clients that paid me thousands of pounds a month were not going to work with little Tin Pot Maddie. And it flopped really quickly. Like I had £20,000 worth of inheritance from my grandpa, and I blew the lot on spending, on launching a business that I thought was going to be really great. I bought snazzy chairs and a water fountain for my waiting room, and I just, I kitted it all out so it looked really professional, but it was shit. Um, that was a big risk. But it wasn't a calculated risk. It was just me thinking, oh, I'll do this because I'm good at it. When I started my second business, I was made redundant and I was a bit more reserved with the risks that I took. And I used the money that I had from my redundancy and I bootstrapped it and I did it all on a budget. By this point, I was, Maddie, the money saving expert, so I knew what I was doing when it came to like doing things on a shoestring. Um, but I said to my husband, I said, give me 3 months. I had a benchmark. I was like, look, let me do this for 3 months, and if I can't do it, I'll go and find a job. Um, we're now 8 years down the line, and I still haven't been back to the corporate world. They didn't like me there. Something about the ADHD, like oversharing, distractiveness, whatever. But I didn't fit in there. So
I think just quickly on that point as well, because I had a conversation on LinkedIn this morning about this, and it was like sometimes people, I don't believe anyway, maybe I'm slightly that way, etc., etc., etc. But I don't think certain people are necessarily born to be there, and are potentially maybe entrepreneur minded just by their nature,
I,
in the respect to their
yeah,
I hate using the corny term of a born leader because it sounds a bit egotistical, but that could be a way to describe it, right? A born leader, a born entrepreneur, a born what I would call a pure blood entrepreneur,
I don't think you're
right?
born an entrepreneur. I feel like it's carved out from the experiences you've had in life. Um, you only have to go and follow somebody like Simon Squibb, who like he had absolutely nothing. He was homeless. His parents had chucked him out. He had a bad experience, but he had to become an entrepreneur. And it's that force of having to do something in a situation where you don't necessarily want to or have to. It's that almost like a desperation thing. I don't think that entrepreneurship is something you can teach. I think it all comes down to life experience. And
I think to an extent, sorry to cut you off, but I think it's to an extent it comes from that tribal principle of the hunger of like actually
I
hunting,
would say
right?
so.
In modern times, we don't hunt physically. Some people probably do. In most cases, you don't. You hunt for revenue to then purchase through supermarkets,
Yeah.
etc. The ability to eat, right, or the ability to have shelter, the ability to have water, the ability to have heat, right? But we still aren't that far away. Everyone says, "Oh, we're really far away from where we grew up from, and we're not hunter gatherers anymore." It's like, well,
I think we are still.
I actually think we still
Yeah,
are. I think we've changed the metrics in which we use to gauge our social
I
success.
think so.
That's, I think, what we've
Yeah.
changed.
I mean, it's interesting because, there are certain people who say, oh yeah, anybody can be an entrepreneur. Um, Anybody can be a business owner, but I don't think anybody can be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is all about mindset, it's all about drive and passion, trying to do good in the world. And I think entrepreneurship and making a difference is something that is very different to being a business owner, and especially being a lifestyle business owner. Not knocking that in any way, shape, or form. Like, I have been a lifestyle business owner. I have run a business that just bought me enough to live every month, and that's absolutely fine. But entrepreneurship is about that drive and that passion. It's about fundraising. It's about being bigger. It's about striving towards an exit, and wanting to build something that is a lot larger and a lot more kind of impactful.
The word I would use would be legacy more
Yes.
than necessarily
Yeah.
exit, because I don't think that everyone necessarily, and I'm never saying never, right? But I don't think everyone goes into it, and if you do, I would say that's an alarm bell for me anyway.
Yeah.
If you're going into it with, I'm going to build this to sell it, it's like,
No. I mean, so people keep
okay.
asking me like what I want to do with Mad About Money, and I don't want to exit. I don't. I want to build it to a point where it's big enough that like it can float, and that people can get involved with shares, and I want it to be a public company. I feel like there are things that I've done in the past where I have built them to want to sell, but this isn't necessarily one of those things. I want to build.
That's, I think, no, I was just going to say, that's, I think, the important point, and we talk about this a lot in the content that we do a lot, is about vision and about principle, right? Some people's definition of the word success is, I get to spend every hour I can with my children, right? They may only work 2 days a week or 4.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
Look,
that was never
it is
gonna
what
happen.
it is what it is. It is what it is, right? Like, to some people, that's that. To other people, it's living on a beach and working very little. Okay, fine, right? To others, it's building a massive empire that means their name, the name of the company, their name, whatever, is meaning of something.
Yeah.
Right? Right? And this is what I'm saying about vision. It's not about, we're going to create this illusion, we're going to create this reality of, you have to do this. No. I have a vision, and as long as the concept of being authentic, we talked a little bit about earlier, the concept of being authentic for me is, are you in line with your current vision, whatever that ends up being?
Absolutely, yeah, and
right?
totally agree with that. I think for but also as a business owner and an entrepreneur, I take every single day and every single hurdle as it comes, because there are so many of them. It's not all hearts and flowers that people put out on social media. It's not. And I'm very authentic, especially on LinkedIn. I talk about the rough with the smooth. And I think that's why people buy into me, because they know that I'm not some bullshitter who's going out there telling people I'm making £1 million a month when I'm not. There have been months where I can't afford to pay myself. There have been months where I can't afford to eat. There have been months where I've done 10K months, sometimes even 20K months. But I don't think that those are the things that are important. I think it's how you make people feel. It's the product, it's the service you offer. And it's about how you're making the impact.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice place to end. So for those people who, are interested in anything you've talked about, your story, etc., 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 the app, what you're doing with your business stuff, etc., and or anything else in between, where's best for people to reach out? Where's people to connect with you? Because I'm sure there will be a percentage that will want to potentially discuss any of the above.
Yeah. Hopefully. So I've got 2 websites, maddyalexandergrout.com, and I've got madaboutmoneyofficial.co.uk. LinkedIn's a good place to find me at Maddy Alexander Grout. And of course, download the Mad About Money app. It's completely free. It's not just for personal finance, it's also for business, it's for entrepreneurship, and it's for anything to help you to self-develop, be better in your life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For those... No, you're very welcome. For those who have listened to this, who are really inspired, who are maybe going to take that leap into self-employment, they're going to build that business, they're going to build that idea. What, if you were going to give advice, what one piece of advice would you give to that set of people?
Have a safety net, and make sure that you're building on that safety net, because especially at the moment, it's risky. Entrepreneurship doesn't always work out the way that you want it to, not to be negative. But having a safety net and making sure that you have budgeted to leave your job is the most important thing.
Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this video. If you did, why not be subscribed? You can always take it back if you change your mind about the content moving forward. But thank you ever so much for the time and the investment of attention for this episode, and I'll see you very